Michael, and they always get my name wrong because they don't read the email, they don't read my LinkedIn, they don't read my Twitter, they don't read any of my social media. They understand that my name is Jordan, not Michael. Michael is the last name. But the first thing they see is that's recognizable is Michael. Michael, I coming to you, you're an expert, I hear you're very good. All of those things are true, but my name is not Michael. And it's immediately the little details that begin to get you the wheels turning. So they come to me with a script or they have an idea. And the tell that I always say is, okay, this is how much it's going to cost to work with me any further than 5 minutes from now. And they say, okay, we can't afford that. Okay. And when I worked at, the different agencies, the different studios, the different production companies, I would always hear from the people who have had the mega success in this business. You can always tell an amateur because they accept that as gospel, and this is the rate, and that's it. Notice the most important part of this entire business they don't know how to do on their very first meeting. They don't know how to negotiate. They don't know how to barter. That's how I can tell I'm dealing with an amateur. They hear a price or they hear a requirement, and then they immediately turn and go in the other direction. Where is the negotiation? Where is the business savvy? Where is the let's sit down at a table and talk things over and get things done? That's the true mark of an amateur. They don't even know, because again, if you can't even negotiate with me after I give you a price, you'll never get through the agencies, the management companies, the studios, the bond companies, the insurance companies, the tax board, the franchise unions. That the list goes on and on of people who you're going to have to negotiate with. And I'm an easy person to negotiate with. I'm simple. Those other groups I just named, the 7 to 10 groups I just named, those are the harder groups to tackle. Those are the level bosses of negotiation, right? You literally have to beat the level boss to move to the next level.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yep, absolutely.
If that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay.
So let's start there.
They don't
know how to negotiate. I'm here. Yeah.
Perfect. Yep. Looking good. You're looking good. So let's talk about that then. So let's talk about after the step that you found out that they are not. Now that we've established to the audience, when you reach out to somebody like Jordan or any professional for that matter, that to help you support you get your script from, I don't even want to say concept to creation because you've already developed the concept, but there's going to be a lot of work involved from there. It's not necessarily finished. It's just essentially somebody's ready to buy now. Somebody's willing to invest in it. So they come to you and they actually have the knowledge and saying, Jordan, I have this script. We've been working on it for 5 years now. I put together my LLC and I have demonstration of chain and title to be able to show you that I put work into this property, into this IP. It's an IP now. And I've also perhaps maybe optioned this literacy. I optioned this book that is attached to it. And I have 2 years on it before I have to renegotiate. I have a year left. I'm coming to you now because what is my next step? And they say, but first, after you give me your advice, I need to understand how much I need a budget to have you on my team. Where do we go from there?
Correct. So what that person that you described, what I see from that, what you just described, is okay. So first of all, what I see is a collection of tools. I don't see any assets, and those are different. Those are two different things. For example, I always tell people you don't want to be set with a number of tools versus an asset, right? There's a philosophical concept, an instrumental position, and there's an instrumental good and a positional good. Those are the two kinds of goods that I refer to all the time, back and forth, right? A tool versus a tool and an asset, right? A tool, singular purpose, limited purpose. Therefore, since it has a singular purpose and the purpose is limited by its form or function, it has a limited time frame of usefulness, right? Versus an asset. An asset has use or value in every and any situation. For example, I love superheroes. I use superheroes as a metaphor because everyone knows who I'm talking about and everyone's seen the movies. The character of Iron Man is a tool. He's only as useful as his technology he uses. So if the Avengers went back in time to the 1600s, Iron Man he would be a tool. He has limited functionality because he doesn't have access to technology. Versus an asset, like Thor's hammer. No matter what time or place Thor's hammer exists in, it has value. It can summon lightning, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I tell people what you're showing me in this pile of things that you have is a bunch of tools that even taken together don't turn into an asset. The movie is the asset. That will have value no matter where it is, right? So how do we turn your 20 tools into an asset? We need to have the connective tissue between the tools, the budget and schedule. And here's how much I charge for that. Then the creative will say, I can't afford that. I have to go do these other things. Well, let's sit down and talk about what we can barter, negotiate, and think of together in terms of equity arrangements to be able to get me on board to get this budget and schedule done correctly. Because at the end of the day, these are just tools. These tools, even taken together, don't make the asset because they need to have the power between the tools, the interworkings between the tools to be able to make the movie. The movie is the asset. The things you just described are tools, and you have to understand the difference. And positional good, right? The difference between those two things philosophically, right? An instrumental good is good for you, that then also leads to other things that are good for you, right? The budget and schedule is an instrumental good. It gives you information, which then allows you to go get other things that are good for your project, like money, right? The problem is to get the instrumental good of the budget and schedule, you may need to engage with someone who has a positional good. Positional because it's a rarity. There's not a lot of people that know how to do line producing to that level of specificity to be able to trigger or secure financing, period. So, instrumental good, positional good. You may need to engage a positional good whose value is that it's rare, to be able to get the instrumental good to lead you to other good things, if that makes sense. That is the pipeline, the positional to instrumental good pipeline.
Okay, great. So to reiterate, essentially, people need a production schedule and a budget after they have a script.
That's the instrumental good. Correct. That's the instrumental good. Because those things empower you to go get other things that will help power the mechanism further.
To create the asset.
To create the asset, right, exactly. We are working with a bunch of tools. We don't know how to collapse it all into one asset. The Marvel characters, right? The different Marvel characters when they were at the different studios, a collection of tools reaching a specific audience with a specific genre, and it's built in and it's ready to go. But those all apart are just a set of tools. How do we collect all those tools together to make an asset called the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And we see the success difference between the Marvel movies individually and then the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a franchise. Tools versus asset. I'd rather take the tools together and reconfigure or rearrange them into an asset that has value that will ever expand.
Absolutely. And that's what an asset is.
That's what an asset is versus a tool. Limited functionality, limited purpose, therefore it has a limited time versus asset. Evergreen purpose and value, no matter where or what time it's in, it has value.
Okay, great. So should we talk about after you have performed these services and go down that road, or shall we continue to talk about the production and the budget and dive more deeper into that? What do you think?
Well, you're the host. I mean, I trust your judgment. Where would you like to lead the conversation?
I feel that if we can expand more on why the production schedule and budget is so beneficial, and you touched on it briefly in regards to being able, these are the things that you get when you put these things together, because there are other things that you need to put together as well, which I would imagine that you would give advice on. Once you assume the production schedule and you have the budget, then you put together your pitch package, which you're going to need other marketing materials, potentially if you want a trailer, like a sizzle, to demonstrate the type of feeling and tone that you're going for. At that point in time, you're going into it's more like of a producer mindset. But anyway, if you want to talk about that going into that avenue, and after you have these two very important things, right? Because the first thing you do when you go talk to somebody if you're going to a production company. Now, if you're going to go through a literacy agent route that's going to like try to sell your script, that's a different route. We're talking about you yourself coming to a producer saying, I have this script and I want this movie to be made. That's what we're
Sure.
that's what we're talking about here, right?
Sure. I mean, again, it's like, people. For example, I know exactly the example to use in this scenario. So a lot of filmmakers I see, or a lot of the creative class as a group, the creative class will come to me and say, we want to go after tax credits, rebates, and incentives. I'm like, first of all, you don't have the budget and schedule done well enough to be able to go get tax credits, rebates, and incentives. And because you're not, for example, tax credits, rebates, and incentives, a lot of the time activate after you've spent a certain amount of money. You can't just say, I want to make a $30,000 feature and get tax credits. That's not spending enough money, right? And even if you do spend enough money to activate tax credits, rebates, and incentives, for example, you need to be able to have the budget and schedule to be able to say, okay, I'm able to sell, for example, selling my tax credit on the open market to someone with a tax liability, right? I'm not able to show them how much I can get for that. I'm not able to secure that tax credit from the state film controller for that budget that's done correctly. I get the letter from the state issuing my tax credit. Then I resell that tax credit to someone with a tax liability on the open market, which then I get paid for, right? All of that maneuvering comes from the budget that has to be done correctly, that has to be done to the letter, to the point. And if it's not done, not only are you not able to sell your tax credit, but then your fringes and globals will be done wrong. And so then, because your fringes, which are like another tax that you have to pay in addition to labor, that's all done wrong and level at the federal level, and it triggers an investigation or at least an inquiry from the Labor Department and possibly even the Justice Department, because of the fact that you're not paying your taxes correctly to your employees or your independent contractors on your LLC, which is a business, which the movie is a business. I tell people, you want to know how I know the movie is a business? It's because you make an LLC for it and you can sell it at a festival. That's a business. So all of that paperwork that people think is not important, it's the turnkey documentation for everything else to flow. Those two sets of paperwork.
Do you often get people coming to you and saying, "Hey, I feel like this script is a $10 million film, or because
Right.
or $5 million or $3 million," and then obviously, do you ask them that, or do you look at it and say, "Well, let me tell you how much this is really going to cost"? Like, how does that work?
So my process is I'll charge for a read. I'll read the script, and then I will give, because I tell people we can't go around giving estimations, because what happens if you actually come across someone that believes that, then they tell their people and their legal team, you told us it would cost this and it's actually going to cost this. I mean, right? Because I don't do estimations because there's no need to, right? I'd rather just read it and figure out what it actually costs down to the penny, because we're going to need that literally empirical data to go to any place to get any of this information or any of these things that you're wanting. Because again, it comes back to the things like fringes. If you get your fringes wrong, you're going to be in violation of paying your taxes correctly on the movie. So I tell people may have an idea of what they think that it might cost, but here's the problem. That's like, I have a sister who's an attorney who I love dearly, right? That's like someone going to my sister for help saying, I think it's going to cost this much for, a distribution deal or an endorsement deal. It's going to be $100 million. And she's going to say, but that number doesn't mean anything to me for one reason. You don't have the training, background, or experience to ever come up with any number. So it doesn't matter, right? So I tell people, leave the number talk to me. That's where my expertise is. All you have to do is give me the script, I'll read it, and I'll come up with a range estimation myself that will be 1,000 times more accurate than anything that you, your writer friends, or anyone that you've ever talked to has probably said. Because we can't tell the conditions of what those people's experiences are when they read the script. Someone who made movies 35 years ago will say, I made this kind of movie for $3 million. That was 35 years ago. Well, prices probably don't go up that much. Oh, you want to make a bet? You know what I mean? So I tell people, don't give me a range. Give me a genre. I'd rather hear the genre, and I'd rather hear the time of the the place, right? Like the circa in time. For example, my rule of thumb is every 10 years that you go back decade wise, that's an extra $10,000 in every department.
Oh, I like that.
Right. It's just I've done enough budgets now to see that play out over and over again. So I tell people there's someone I know who wants to make a movie set in New York in the 80s. I'm like, you realize that that's going to be $40,000 in every single department in this budget additionally. Why? Because they have those things in the 80s. It has to look like 1983, right? And if it doesn't look like 1983 perfectly, it's going to break the illusion.
Love that. Yep, absolutely.
And he doesn't believe that, but I told him numerous times it has to look like 1983. I mean, I tell people Sex and the City 2. Remember Sex and the City 2? The most expensive scene was where they had that flashback scene of everything being in the late 80s, right? The hair, the cars, the building deco, the set deck, all of that stuff has to look for that 30 seconds like we're in 1987 or whatever it was, right? So I tell people that stuff is expensive. You have to get an entire scene of those 80s cars, an entire scene of that 80s clothes, the makeup, the hair. That's specialized stuff that's not available anymore. It has to be recreated perfectly.
Absolutely.
That's expensive.
Okay, so now that we've talked about that, one thing that I thought was interesting as well is, okay, so now that you're going to come back and say, here's the budget. This is from my experience, my expertise, and here's why. But that's when you can come in and say, these are the tax credits that we have available to you. So that's an added value benefit, right? As someone who brings you on a service, you come back with like this quote unquote report where you're saying, okay, given the scenario, if you film here or you film here, these are my recommendations, because then that's going to support your budget. In addition to that, if you're under $3 million films and reading from this script, I could imagine that you could use these SAG benefits as well, meaning like if you have a certain amount of minorities in your film, or you have a certain amount of, within a certain budget range, will save you money as well. So that's when you can really come back and give the value to them. So in essence, hiring you will actually pay for itself. Correct.
But people don't know enough about numbers and how that process will take place, right? They just don't understand it's a value quotient. It's a calculation. These are people who are, you know what it is? I tell people when the creative class shows up to me with a script, what I tell people, now what you are is what you're going to try to attempt to do when they talk to investors, production companies, streamers, or studios. What I always tell them, the comparison I make is you're about to try to conjure the magic show at the science fair, and it will never, ever work. Ever, in your wildest daydream. You can never conjure a magic show at a science fair. The people with the MBAs, the law degrees, the business degrees, the finance degrees, the CEOs, the CPAs, they will never go along with your magic show of illusion. It's illusion. Ever. So we've got to prepare someone who's a magician with a stage act to be able to stand up to the duress of being at the graded science fair, period. That's what I'm the translator. I will help you turn your magic show into something built to withstand the pressure of the science fair.
That's awesome. Yep, that's a good one. That's another good one, Jordan. That's
brilliant. Oh, thank you. I tell people I need an easy comparison. Creatives are magicians with a stage act that impresses everyone that they know, all their friends. But we have to turn this stage act into a scientific proposition for the science fair.
Scientific proposition, yes.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. I tell people, you may not like the way that it comes across in the way that I say it, but this is what the work requires. Again, put another way, you're trying to scale. Yeah, you can tell your friends that you can scale a small hill, but now you're trying to climb not only Mount Everest, you're trying to climb Mount Olympus. We can't climb Mount Everest or Mount Olympus with consumer grade tools. We need professional grade tools and assets to scale both Mount Everest and Mount Olympus. Period. End of story. That is the only way forward. And the creative class will still sit there and tell me, they'll look up at Mount Everest or Mount Olympus and say, it doesn't look that bad.
Now, so it sounds like to me, as of right now, we're talking to the audience, we're talking to the creators that are just starting out, that have a script.
Okay? Right.
So just to
the biggest audience for my calculation.
The biggest, yes, I love that. Yeah, it's essentially people that are starting out who are bridging from, hey, I wrote this script to now, how do I take it to the next level? And that's what Jordan's here to talk to us about today. He is talking to us because he's trying to give us the tools that he has available that can put those tools to the next level so that it becomes an asset. Remember, the asset is the film itself. But in order to make a film, you need to put together all of these tools together successfully and produce the film. Then it becomes an asset. Now, filmmaking is, in my opinion, the hardest art form that exists out there because depending on your script, it is including all the bells and whistles that art has to provide. You have makeup, you have hair, you have sound design, you have editing, you have camera technicians, you have scripts. I mean, name it. Anything that we can think of as humans, we're going to try to figure out how to put it into the art form called motion pictures. So it is the most complicated because we have to organize all of these beautiful artistic forms and put it together and use it to drive someone's feelings and emotion because we're in the emotion business, essentially. We're in the feelings business. There's really no way to measure it outside of the fact of how it makes people feel. So Jordan is here because he is the one that's going to give us the opportunity to be able to take our intellectual property, which is the script, put it together so we can put some context to it. For example, having a schedule saying, this is how long it's going to take you to be able to produce this script. You're going to need 90 days. And then from taking that, breaking it down from all the very specific details, meaning we're going to need this many wigs, we're going to need this many production cars, we're going to need for this 30-second flashback sequence of the 1970s, we're going to need all these other items to make this illusion become real. He's going to put together a budget for you. So then when you go over and talk to people seriously, they are going to be like, yeah, this is great. How much are we talking about here? And then that's the tools that Jordan gives you. In addition to that, Jordan, why don't you talk about other things like we were talking about right now about like getting quote unquote bridge loans and starting to get investments. So that way, like, where do you start to get the money? Well, first you start with your friends and family and you put on your show, meaning you share with them your script, and you're going to get some feedback from that because what often happens is like, I don't know how to read a script. I don't know if this is a good script or a bad script. I don't know what to do with this. And then that means that you then proceed forward and you start to discover, maybe I need to put together a one-page synopsis. And then you also start to do some more research and start to try to understand. And well, maybe all I need to do is convey is my pitch, my log line. Or maybe what I really need to do is tell them what this story universally is about and why it should be made. And that's the journey into getting something that is an intellectual property off the ground, getting funding, and also getting it made. Very, very difficult. One of probably, in my experience, the most difficult thing I've ever done. I myself have been working on an intellectual property for over 6 years now and barely got it to a literacy agent after that this long. So
right. Right.
So it's taken that.
I mean, it's the Sisyphean Sisyphean challenge, right?
Yeah.
But no, I tell people, let's start with the script. Let's get some basic telemetrics on this script, the budget and schedule. Because I tell people the budget and schedule automatically separate you from 98% of your competitors in the marketplace, really for one reason. Even if they do have a air quote schedule and an air quote budget, that quote air quote schedule and budget are not going to pass the science fair test. When I show it to investors, CPAs, people who do this for a living, so it's a bunch of numbers on a page, which absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing, right? This means nothing, right? I've seen it in the room. I've been in the room. And it's like, or they have a schedule that says we're going to shoot 10 pages a day and we have a 300-page script and we'll make it work. And like the executive says at the studio, it's that you may make it work. And that'll be the eighth wonder of the world. But it's nothing that me, her, him, them, anyone at any studio is ever going to buy because the quality will be terrible.
Absolutely.
So no. So I tell people, it's like anything else we're building. We're using tools to build an asset. Let's do it the right way the first time. It's almost like people think that filmmaking is an art form, which is very, very true. Also, the military meets the circus, right? I try to implement the military level discipline as early as possible because the less circus we have, the more discipline we have. Again, military meets the circus, magic show at the science fair. Same idea. We're going to need hard assets and hard information to convince people who see this every day that they should spend their hard-earned money, their institution's hard-earned money, their consumers' hard-earned money on your project, which you have promised me is not just a tool, it will become an asset that will turn evergreen returns for this business or this operation until the end of time. That's what they want to see. And if you can explain that succinctly, clearly, and confidently, then you're out of the pitch queue. And there is a pitch queue. You know, you're in there at 10 o'clock, but there's someone else in there at 11 o'clock because they have to keep the pitch queue going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very well said. And so from moving on from there, now we have all these, we're putting these tools together. So we have our production schedule, we have our budget. And now, like you said, first start putting your illusion, your this is great because Jordan's looking at it from the point of view of, hey, I am the science teacher right now. Okay. I'm supporting you. I'm the bridge between supporting you and getting it over to the science fair. And I'm taking your illusion, your magic show, and I'm going to help you get it to be seen at the science fair. The science fair is essentially the people who are working the Wizard of Oz, right? The person behind the curtain that's going to prop up and create your movie, which Jordan likes to refer to it as the illusion, which is the movie magic, essentially. So now that we've gone to our friends and family and we've shown them the how beautiful this show is, and they are actually inspired. They give you a quote unquote bridge loan. Could be $500, could be $1,000, could be $5,000, $10,000, $20, $50, $100, whatever. They give you that money. Then you're like, what do I do next? Well, with that is when actually you would actually bring somebody on like Jordan, a line producer, to produce your production schedule and your budget, and he will consult with you and or support you in creating a pitch deck. Would you agree with that, Jordan?
I would agree with that. I think we would start that process, and like any good superhero, here to save the day and power you through the next level of the video game. I have friends. I can bring along my friend, the attorney, who can help you start to jog ideas about your distribution agreements. So when they come, you're able to take out the sword and shield and say, I'm ready to do battle. I've seen this before. I can bring along my friend, the distribution consultant, who can bring up some really great ideas on what distributors are going to be looking for and what their language is and what they're looking for. So we can start building those elements into the product before it's even made, right? I can bring in my good friend in marketing and consumer products and start saying, how can that one line that's so great from the movie that we can put on t-shirts and mugs and plasters and all these other things. Let's figure out, let me read the script and figure out what is the tagline going to be? What is the big line that everyone's going to be quoting going to be? Let's do an analysis of that. So there's lots of ways to, again, turn this tool into an asset that can be exploded into many different, kind of portmanteaus of value across many different mediums. I mean, our favorite example by our AFI brethren, right? Everything, everywhere, all at once. What did everyone quote on Twitter for the last 12 months that everyone saw? I want to do laundry and taxes with you. That's from Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. That one line that Kay Kwan delivered so beautifully is now on t-shirts and backpacks and marriage proposals and engagement letters. I see it everywhere now. Incredible. Mm-hmm. Right. And what was the one before that? I See Dead People from The Sixth Sense, written by M. Night Shyamalan, right? So I tell people, that if you're really, really good, there can be assets even within the script that can have value outside the script, like those killer lines. Everyone knows those lines.
Mm-hmm. And what was the one that I think of? Before was I'll be back, right?
I'll be back. It's simple, right?
Right. Yeah.
Everyone, I mean, in The Mandalorian, this is the way, right? I see it everywhere now. So I tell people it's building those assets. Even if the assets are non tangible and just in the script, you need someone to help you read the script and say, this is an asset. I tell people I go through scripts that I read and I tag every asset, intangible or not, that I think can be expressed in different ways in the ancillary product stream.
Absolutely.
Not every line producer does that. But why am I able to do that? My first job in this industry was in consumer products. So I know all the people that we would need to contact or connect with to get that process going.
Absolutely. And these are all the people that when you first bring on a line producer will be able to support you with your, once again, production schedule and your budget. And then you start looking into the pitch package, which essentially is everything that Jordan was referring to. You got to think about distribution. You got to think about marketing. You also have to think about, your team. Like, so if you're the writer, who are you bringing onto your team to direct this? What are your comparable films? What other films within this budget range, now that you've gotten this information from Jordan, what was their success rate look like? What did their success look like? What was their marketing budget? There are tools. There's other tools out there, professional tools where, that you can get these numbers and resources because what you're doing is building a case for yourself to take to the science fair and demonstrate to them, this is why I believe that this intellectual property is going to be successful, and get them really excited about it. And it's very, right?
I agree. I agree. And I tell people, even after the science fair, you may even have to go through congressional testimony with that same material, right? Because the science fair is the entry of congressional level testimony with all these people asking questions about how this is going to work. We go from the science fair to the congressional testimony chamber.
Absolutely.
And it's that level of inquiry or research or depth of knowledge that you're going to have with these kinds of matters.
Absolutely. And it's very interesting to me, for instance, let's take someone like George Lucas. George Lucas, how many films did he direct? Let's see, the one at USC was very popular.
Right.
Then he went on and did Graffiti.
American Graffiti.
And then after that, what did he do? Star Wars.
Exactly, right.
And after that, what has he done outside of the Star Wars franchise?
Right.
None. Right? Am I correct? Am I correct? Okay, so
you are correct.
So what did he do there? He's doing exactly what Jordan is talking about. He discovered that I don't want to say, I can't speak for him, but he didn't go on and make any other films, direct any other films, but he still creates assets in this industry.
He does. And they're assets because they always have value. They maintain value. Right? That's the difference between a tool and an asset. Some producers create lots of great tools that will do for right now what it's meant to do for right now. But those tools retire in 2 years, right? Nobody remembers those tools. What about assets? Those are the big swings that even if it costs me more effort to build, it will last longer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I would venture to say, and once again, I can't speak for George. I haven't spoken to George. But he discovered that his knack, not only is he a great director and he could direct, but he understands the movie business acumen so well that he creates assets. And he found and partnered with other great directors like Steven Spielberg with the Indiana Jones franchise.
Right.
And continued just to create assets. And I think James Cameron as well kind of pulled from his book. In that regard, because James Cameron started off as a director. He was really successful and really good, but then he started to branch out into creating assets. Right. And I think with the new Terminator, what was the latest one that didn't do so well? Sometimes it doesn't work.
Well, I mean, to go back to the Lucas example, George creates assets that not only he uses, but everyone else uses too, right? Skywalker Sound, ILM, right? Those assets are so good and they're so valuable and they're so powerful that people come to him and to his group to do their high level production needs, right? So I tell people he's so good at creating assets. He's created an asset for himself that then builds other assets around it that he can then use as services to competitors, collaborators, these kinds of things. That's the true definition of Oz behind the curtain. I've created an entire universe where people have to basically use my inventions, use my services. I mean, that's Steve Jobs, right? When you walk into an Apple store, Apple is the only one of the only companies that uses its own products to explain itself to you. That's out of the Lucas playbook. I'm going to use my own products to double back on my own assets.
Yeah. So what I guess if I'm understanding that correctly, it's essentially because of Skywalker Ranch. Well, essentially, Lucas created the 5.1 surround sound. Is that correct?
Right.
Right.
Correct.
So now all movies, he's touching all movies because of his assets. So every single movie that wants to create a DCP and utilize the 5.1 surround sound system, you got to go through Lucas. So he's touching all movies now, right? So that's the kind of thinking that Jordan is bringing to the table here. He's thinking about, the assets and how you can looking at it from a business point of view. Now I know for creatives who are listening, this can be just something that you're not into whatsoever because you're just like, I just want to create and then I want to move forward. I just want to be able to create my things. I'm not worried about this whole business thing, X, Y, and Z. But that's the very reason why you bring on a professional like Jordan, because he's worrying about those things for you. That's why you're hiring him. That's the main difference. If you try to go and embark on this journey and try to figure all this stuff out, you're going to figure out that this is a business and you don't think that way, and it's going to turn you off. That's why you bring on professionals.
And in your first meeting with a studio that wants to acquire your work, they're going to say, so tell us about the assets. Right. What are we paying for that's going to bring us value in the long term? In 5 years from now, how is this franchise bringing us value? In 10 years, in 20 years, right? It's all about asset management. I mean, there was a huge report in Variety Magazine, VIP Insights, where franchises still bring the biggest number of viewers because they're the biggest number of assets that come from the franchise. The spin-offs, the sequels, the prequels, the toys. I mean, for example, I tell people, people ask me sometimes for marketing ideas or consumer products ideas, right? So I'll give a freebie, right, for your listeners. This is the first time I've discussed this with, and so I keep, for example, if DC Entertainment and Warner Brothers contacted me about a clothing line or a kind of pistache line for their characters, right? I would have remember when you and I are roughly the same age, Renee. Remember when Twilight was really big,
mm-hmm.
and they had the Team Jacob, Team Edward back and forth. They had the T-shirts, and the whole thing was Team Jacob and Team Edward.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I would say let's take that concept to the next level with DC, and let's do Team Ring versus Team Magic Word. And what I mean by that is you have Team Ring, or Team Beetle, Flash, and Green Lantern, right? Versus Team Magic, or let me rephrase that. So Team Ring would be the Flash, because in the new Flash trailer he has a ring. And his teammate on the Justice League, Green Lantern, has a ring,
mm-hmm.
right? So Team Ring, and you have a T-shirt with Team Ring, but then you have Team Magic Word. Shazam, who's in theaters right now, who says literally a magic word to turn into a superhero. And Blue Beetle, the Latino superhero from El Paso, Texas, which some of my friends are very excited about, he has a magic word too, Kajida,
mm-hmm.
right? From the original Blue Beetle comics in the 1940s. So you would have Green Lantern on one T-shirt, Team Ring, and Team Magic Word would have another set of T-shirts and another set of, so they're all on the same team, the Justice League, but we would have different factions of who you root for in an Avengers, Captain America Civil War type of showdown. It's Team Ring versus Team Magic Word.
That's good, and that's a great example of how that works, and
or how it could work.
How it could work.
These are assets that have greater purpose or value if you give them that greater purpose or value, right? For example, the Atom, a DC character who shrinks down. The most immediate asset building for the Atom that comes to my mind is, where is the Atom Pikmin level game? Remember Pikmin? from the 90s where you had like the creatures that you could control that are subterranean, right?
Mm.
Pikmin could be remade in the style of Adam as a Pikmin character, right?
And now you have a video game asset.
And now you have a video game asset where it combines the power of the DC, library of priceless DC superhero characters with a modern application of Pikmin, right? Where is that game? I mean, so really, these assets are powerful because they can be transported and transposed in many different ways, right? It's just the creativity with finding those ways, right?
Right.
That's really what it is. It's like, let's see here, Captain Cold, Killer Frost. Where are the Captain Cold, Killer Frost ice cream treats? Where is the cross promotion with Ben and Jerry's or Cold Stone Creamery or Ample Hills Creamery? You know what I'm saying? You have your cold themed superheroes or supervillains that could easily be cross promoted in ice cream flavors, which is what they are and what they do. I mean, there's so much potential for these characters. For example, Coke Mini, Pepsi Small, right? You have the Atom and you have like someone like Etrigan the Demon, right? Who gets mad when he can't get his Pepsi Mini, right? And you have the Atom, his Justice League teammate, running around with the Pepsi Mini. I mean, there's so many ways to use these assets to grow them into even bigger assets that have bigger value. It just requires that thinking.
Absolutely. And I think who did that very well, at least when I was growing up, was McDonald's, right? You'd always have the Happy Meal, and whatever movie was coming out, you'd always get the action figure.
Right.
Right. So like,
Right.
Or it sometimes wasn't even an action figure. I remember, but they would still be promoting it on their Happy Meal boxes. They'd be promoting it with the posters and signage inside McDonald's, and you knew that the movie was out.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely right. But it's gotten a little different now because they kind of bypass that. For instance, I was speaking to you earlier about the Whitney Houston movie.
Right.
I never even heard that movie came out. Like I wasn't even aware of it. I wasn't touched.
Sure.
And I like the movie. I mean, I generally like Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston. I remember watching The Bodyguard. And so I picked that movie out of nowadays you have so many different options. Right. So like I was like, oh, out of all the options, there was Tar was another option. I was like, oh, the Tar looks good. The Whale,
Right.
Shout out to Darren. Can I call him Darren? Can I call you Darren?
yeah, you can call him Darren.
But he's definitely another AFI alum. Shout out to AFI. By the way, Jordan is sitting at AFI right now, where Darren Aronofsky's thesis film exists, is stored, but we can't watch it for whatever reason.
That's true.
Right? Isn't that true?
So yeah, I mean, I think that is true. I've not asked why, but
That's
rules
true, right?
are rules. But yeah, I feel like but again, it goes back to asset creation. It's like again, even with the Team Ring, Team Magic Word example, those are fun new ways to reinterpret those characters and give them a specific purpose. Right? Flash and Green Lantern over here, and Jaime Reyes and Billy Batson over here. And they have this fictional feud back and forth, and it's Team Ring or it's Team Magic Word. That's a fun way, colorful way to apply these characters that have been around for 50, 75, almost 100 years into new generations.
Absolutely. But so the question that I think of in my head is like, oh yeah, that's all fine and dandy, Jordan, but how do I create? Like that is 100 years of that's a 100-year-old creation that I'm working against. And I'm curious in like, what's my script about?
Who is this? What is this?
No, I'm just saying, and I'm saying that, okay, the examples that we're giving is sound advice, but that's like 100 years, for those comic books or what have you. That is 100 years that we have for those franchises now that they're called franchises, those assets. I'm someone that's coming to you with a script, and I am curious of how we can start creating those assets, given that. Right. I mean, coming to you with a script about a historical figure, for instance, that took place in the 1950s, and how can we create something from that? How can we get that on cereal boxes? How can we get that on, I don't even want to say Mickey D's of the world, but like, obviously the big ones that you think about is like McDonald's, Coke, and Pepsi.
Right.
How do we incorporate that and build assets from that? And where you, to your point, not one-offs, right? Like the Indiana Jones is still going on, reaching new generations.
Right, right. I think it just comes down to having someone look at the material and say, what assets can we build from this material, and what tools can we build from this material? And again, tools and assets are very different. They may seem the same on the surface, but they're very different. Again, is there a quotable line from the script that you immediately laugh at, or you immediately remember, or you immediately think is profound? Can we get that on T-shirts? Can we figure? I mean, I know the multiverse concept is so big right now. Can we somehow, concepts in the movie that may lend itself to other factions or other consumer products initiatives? What are those, and how can we exploit and utilize them? It's really it's an in-depth analysis of how the creative can be turned into commerce.
And that's essentially the subject of today's main conversation, is like talking about like how can we turn these into assets. And
correct.
Once again, as a creative, as a producer, and I also a creative producer, this is a language that you often don't think about. You're not thinking about how to turn outside of the film itself and making money on your film, the film itself. There is potential to create other assets, and that's what Jordan's talking to us about today.
Right, and that's where the real success comes in, right? Going back to the Lucas example, did George Lucas become super successful, one of the most biggest filmmakers in history, because of the movie's box office returns? No, it was the ancillary products, the other products connected to the movie, the toys, the Lego sets, the action figures, the T-shirts, the Pepsi commercials, the ILM assets that they were able to make on those movies that they then
parks.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's a Star Wars land, right? I tell people the Transformers asset to me, a brand is just another word for an asset. The Transformers brand, I mean, they have a new Transformers. I mean, can you imagine that partnership? Transformers are literally mechanical objects or beings that turn into other things. Where are the thousands of Legos sets that you could make off of that idea alone? I don't see it. I wish I did see it. I would buy all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. And now that we just kind of like George Lucas comes to mind, but he's actually the one that created this, to be honest with you, what we're talking about here, because he's the one that negotiated in his contract, because they gave that away. They gave away the rights for him to sell merchandise, essentially. And
sequels. And that was because of one thing. They were thinking merchandise is strictly and only and specifically connected to animated franchises and animated titles at that time. No live action movie had the potential to generate interest in other ancillary products because live action movies just were never made like that before. They were just never made like that before. So the fact that he had this kind of kinetic editing, this kind of grand teenager child, focus on, like John Williams said in an interview once, when he read Star Wars and he first heard about Star Wars from George, he's like, this is going to be a great Saturday afternoon project for kids and teenagers to see, and they're going to have a great time. I'm in.
Right.
That's it. Right. That's exactly what it was. So the fact that the other groups that supported Lucas in this, the toy companies, the video game companies, these all have a shared mission. They want to make the Saturday morning matinee experience for that age group over and over and over and over again. Absolutely.
Right. And he so I'm glad we brought up George Lucas, because he essentially created that. And that's
he did. He created that playbook, and
yes. That's what Jordan's talking about.
Yeah, he created that playbook, and I've seen it tried to be replicated over and over again. But even when I see, like when I get set superhero stuff, right? For example, right? Superhero creators are the ones that contact me because I've won the Jack Kirby Award and I have a superhero, expertise, right? So I tell people every year I see independent creators who want the Marvel DC level of success, but then they miss two powerful assets that are right there in plain sight. A couple of different assets, right? For example, this past Thursday was National Superhero Day, right? That's every year. If I was an independent creator, I'd be giving away my content on comicsology for that day for 6 hours. It's National Superhero Day,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And after Saturday of the year, that the first Saturday in May, two powerful assets are back to back, literally in your purview: National Superhero Day and Free Comic Book Day, and they're literally a week apart. And you don't have the blitz of material ready to prepare yourself for those days, the biggest buying days of that audience. It's
Mm-hmm.
incredible.
Mm-hmm.
But again, they don't think about it like that. I'm like, we have National Superhero Day the last week of August and Free Comic Book Day the first week of May, and they're literally a week apart. And you don't have every asset, everything ready at your disposal to launch a strike attack on those 2 days that are literally a week apart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like I tell people, remember, we have Veterans Day and Memorial Day in our country to celebrate our armed service members. You better make, if you're involved in the armed service business, right? Veterans homes or anything like that. You better have things ready to go at both Memorial Day and Veterans Day. We have 2 days, not one, 2 different days to celebrate our armed service members, right? The comic book community has National Superhero Day and Free Comic Book Day within a week of each other, and they don't have the assets ready to launch something on those 2 days. I see it every year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, DC and Marvel do, right? Because it's that important to them, right? But then I tell people, here's the big, I always whisper to people, here's the big secret that you may not realize. You have to compete with DC and Marvel. You have to, whether you like it or not. So if they're going to launch their big silos on National Superhero Day and then a week later on Free Comic Book Day, you have to be in that space too. Because here's the problem. Even if you do make an independent superhero film, it's going to be in the theater that's right next to a Black Panther movie playing or a Blue Beetle movie playing. So whether you like it or not, you're going to have to learn to compete with the big kids on the playground now or 5 years from now. They're not going away. That's the thing. You have to understand this is part of the ecosystem. And if you want to be in it, you have to learn to get along in that ecosystem as early as possible.
Yeah, and it's actually really simple. Just see what they do, and then essentially what I call swiping as a producer. I see something that I think is really creative. You swipe it, meaning you document it. So that way, when you're ready to run your playbook, you pull up your swipe documents and you recognize and you learn what they do and you copy it. Because if DC
Correct.
and Marvel is doing that, like Jordan says, you should be doing that too. Because they
Right.
have all the money, they have all the talent, they're hiring the best people to think of these ideas. We
That's
don't
right.
have access to do that. So, well, what's the good old quote from Picasso? Great artists steal.
That's true. I mean, I hear it now that all these groups are trying to get into their own version of Marvel or DC, right? And that's fine. But the problem is, are you serious about it? Because again, launching an operation like that is going to be a serious undertaking, right? Launching a Sundance movie operation is a serious undertaking, right? Any operation, anything that involves people other than people you know, is a serious undertaking to someone, right? So let's start there. I tell
Absolutely.
people, you can certainly launch something incredible, but you have to take it seriously. It has to be well done, and it has to be able to be sustained. Right, sustained. Right. How do you build a business? I can't run Walmart for a year and just say, well, we tried it for a year, it didn't work. No. The definition of return and asset is that it goes on and maintains value. Even if not all the products do, the institution maintains value.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And this goes across the board too. I want to make it very clear. I know we're talking very high level, but I feel like if we talk about it this way, using the DC and Marvel, also using Lucas as an example, is a great way for the audience to really understand, because it's something for us to be able to speak to the majority of the audience because they understand these stories. But
Correct.
let's dial it back down a bit here. If we dial it back down, and let's say that you're a creator who has a script, you take it to Jordan, a line producer, and he puts together your production schedule and budget. Now you've embarked on a journey where now you're creating your intellectual property into something that can be created into an asset now, because now you have a production and you also have a budget. Then from there, you start putting together and bringing a team together to talk about all these ideas that Jordan is talking about. Now, Jordan is looking at it, and the expertise that he's bringing to the table is that he's looking at it from the point of view of like, how can we make this project into an asset, not just for a year after we screen it in a movie theater? What are some things that we can do to make sure in perpetuity that this thing continues to play and that we continue to get our name out there? So, for instance, if you're making a film about Valentine's Day, a comedy, probably want to have in your marketing plan someone that you connected with distribution to say, how can we get this film and make sure that it's on Valentine's Day, distributed on Valentine's Day for a lifetime or what have you.
Right.
You know, it's those kind of, right? Thinking of those types of things. So that way, every year, you're getting what they call mailbox money. It doesn't come in the mailbox anymore, but then you're getting you're getting a check, right? They're cutting you a check.
It's true. I mean, it's seasonal success, right? It's like, okay, Halloween movies come out during Halloween.
That's
Disney
right.
has Halloween Town at Halloween. The season does a lot of the environment work for you.
That's the whole idea of assets, right?
That's the entire right.
That's the whole idea.
It's an asset.
Yeah.
Right. It's an asset. We have Earth Day coming up, or it just passed, or whatever, right? Every comic book company has their ocean superhero on display because it's Earth Day, right? National Ocean Day. Marvel will roll out Namor the Submariner, King of the Seven Seas. You know, I mean, it's an asset because it can be used in specific or certain environments in an opportune nth way.
Absolutely.
Right? I tell people, okay. Please,
oh, no, I was going to say, when you were saying Halloween, I was thinking that what's really interesting, too, is that you have other ecosystems that are propping you up. For instance, if you have someone who's, let's say, I don't know, a news channel, they are probably more than likely going to produce something during Halloween. Well, heck, what if they produce a little snip about, oh, did you know that the film Halloween made by John Carpenter in this year was filmed in this house in Pasadena, California? It is now a museum. And what are they doing? They are now promoting your film for other people to go out and watch your film. Probably a good idea to have your film having some marketing dollars behind it to re-promote it, right? If not already, there's probably one already in theaters coming up soon, I'd imagine.
That's true.
The way they are doing it with that franchise.
I mean, look at, like, for example, like music assets, right? Guardians of the Galaxy has what does everyone know Guardians of the Galaxy for? The needle drops, the music that's in those movies, right? Mm-hmm. So I tell people, remember, the owners of those catalogs are when the Guardians movies come out, they're ready with that stuff re-promoted on iTunes and Google Play, so that when people hear the song in the movie, they're going to go home and they're going to buy it. It's a redeployed asset.
Yeah.
Right.
That's assets.
It's a redeployed asset. So I tell people, you know, one of my favorite movies growing up. Can I get personal for a second?
Yeah, for sure.
Because I do have an example. So one of my favorite movies growing up when I was a teenager was the 1998 television miniseries of Merlin with Sam Neill, right? And one of the big reasons I watch it all, I watch it every year around the time it was shown, and which was the spring summer of 1998. One of the reasons it's so enjoyable is because of the fact that now you look back on some of those people in the movie, and, like, for example, the Queen is played by Lena Headey, who went on to play the Queen Cersei in Game of Thrones, right? So now they repackaged the marketing material on the DVD brand or whatever, and it used to say, you know, Rutger Hauer, Sam Neill from Jurassic Park, and Miranda Richardson. But now it can say all those people, and in addition, and Lena Headey from Game of Thrones. Right. Now you have an asset that has renewed interest and value, because now one of your cast members, since that time of that movie 20 years ago, has now become one of the biggest TV stars through Game of Thrones.
This is wonderful, Jordan. This is wonderful.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
This is today's conversation was mainly based on, I love it. I think we're gonna edit this to just talk about mainly assets. I think this is really good.
Oh, thank you, Renee.
Yeah, this was really, really good.